it for a minute. Give me a second. There we go. Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. So we are going to talk about the Building and Sustaining Quality Early Care and Education grant application today. You are potential readers. So the grant just closed yesterday. We received 3 applications, and I will email you the names of those applicants so you can let me know if you have any conflicts or anything, and we'll make sure not to assign those to you. Because you all have already been trained on the Quality Improvement Network, even though not all of you ended up being readers because we didn't need quite so many people, I'm going to go a little bit quicker today, and then I'm going to refer you back to the Quality Improvement Network training because we recorded that one, and that one will walk you through EGMS and show you those common mistakes. But so far it seems like people are kind of getting the hang of it. I've seen a couple of scores come in for the Quality Improvement Network. So if you're a reader on that, please remember that the scores and comments are due tomorrow by the end of the day, by 5 p.m. All right, let's go ahead and get started and talk about the Building and Sustaining Grant. If you have questions, just type them in the box, and then I'll get to them at the end after we turn off the recording. Here's our agenda. Okay, so a little bit of background for you on this grant. We had 3 grants in 2016-17, and the purpose was to really improve the quality of early care and education, improve consumer business and awareness, and provide support for business and administrative needs of child care providers, child development home providers specifically. So those 3 initiatives respectively were our Quality Rating and Improvement System, which we call Capital Quality now, the Child Care Resource and Referral Program, and the Shared Service Business Alliance for Homes. So you're probably familiar with these programs because states have them in their child care development block grants, so they're very common programs. What we decided to do after this first kind of go around was actually consolidate these 3 grants into one, because there is just a ton of coordination that needs to happen. And I'll get into a little bit of kind of what we learned from the 3 different grantees in a minute. Okay, before we get deep into the RFA, I'm actually going to go to our grant page, which you all should be familiar with because it was kind of sent to you early on to get an idea about the grant program. So remember that this is where you can get the RFA. The RFA is going to be just a really nice accompaniment document for you to have as you're doing your scoring, because I'm just going to do a control-find for scoring rubric. You can see it's on page 34. So here, it's, for me at least, much easier to have this by my side if I were to do the scoring and kind of look through here. So we're going to keep this handy. But what I really want to show you is a special document that we developed for this grant to kind of explain why we consolidated the 3 programs. So this is just a one-pager that we put together, and I think this is a really helpful starting point to talking about this grant. So as I mentioned, we were combining 3 previous grants into one grant. So what we want to do is we want to continue the services provided, but also just develop stronger supports and coordination. So why did we do that? And this is the what is changing and why section. So we heard from providers, center owners, homeowners, and then the grantees themselves that they were overwhelmingly needing help with business kinds of supports. So they needed help with things like writing a business plan, marketing, and how to use technology for marketing. And it ended up, when we sat down and totaled the numbers, that a huge amount of the professional development hours delivered to child development facilities under those 3 grants were really focused on this business administrative stuff. A lot of them were very similar training topics, but slightly different audiences. So for example, the Shared Service Business Alliance in DC previously was really focusing on homes. The Child Care Resource and Referral was really getting a lot of newer, soon-to-be or future small center owners coming in and saying, I'm just overwhelmed, I need help with this process. and then the QRIS was focusing on the owners of existing development facilities. So they were all doing kind of really similar work and a very similar theory of change, but slightly different audiences. So we figured there has to be a better way to kind of pull this together. When we really thought about this, we decided that if we focus first on the business and administrative aspects of the child care operations, then we're freeing up time and funding for the providers to enhance the quality. And that's the reason that the quality rating improvement system facilitators, while people say, well, why were they getting into this business discussions? Because you can't make quality improvements if your business isn't on solid footing. You can't make quality improvements if you don't know how to budget, right? If you don't know how to look at your financial statements. The ultimate aim is that families have more reliable and consistent care, and the providers can focus their time and energy on the quality of the programming. So really giving them that business and administrative know-how, because if you don't know how to do something, it takes a lot more of your time, right, to try to understand something. So that's just a little overview of kind of the theory about the grant. So while we do want to do that and do want to kind of break out the, the 3 distinct program areas, let me just close my email so that emails don't come up. We kept the 3 programs and turned them into program areas. So here we have what were the 3 former grants: Capital Quality, Child Care Connections, and Shared Service Business Alliance. And what we did is we said you can apply for 1, 2, or 3 of these program areas, and the maximum amount for which your organization is eligible is linked to what you're applying for. So if I'm applicant A and I'm applying only for Shared Service Business Alliance, my organization is eligible for $500,000. If I'm applying for Child Care Connections and Shared Services, I add these 2 together. If I apply for all 3, I'm eligible for the full $3.15 million. So that's just kind of how we decided to reorganize the grant, and I just thought this would be this is just a helpful one-pager to kind of get you guys started in understanding our thinking about this grant. Okay. So the consolidated purpose statement of this grant, of the Building and Sustaining Grant, is to build the capacity of the early care and education system and expand and enhance quality services for young children and their families. So we're really focusing on the documented business and administrative needs of the facility owners, directors, the caregivers, and then supporting communication and relationships with parents and guardians. Okay, so this is a little bit more about what we mentioned about the consolidation. We really expect collaboration and coordination and a well-delineated plan for that. The services have to continue uninterrupted. A lot of child care providers are already in Capital Quality. A lot of providers and parents get services from Child Care Resource and Referral, and there's a number of child development homes in the Shared Service Business Alliance. So all of these people should not be seeing nobody should be seeing a disruption of service. Okay, so this is a standard section about the allowable and unallowable use of funds. We hammer out the grantee responsibilities, which is a section we'll walk through that really lays out our expectations of whoever wins the funding. And of course, we want to see grant funds only being used towards those purposes. Okay, this is our eligibility. So again, you can see that business and financial management, system level thinking, early childhood, those are all key indicators here. We also want an organization that knows the regulations and developmentally appropriate practice. This grant is 4 years for complicated reasons, but this grant is 4 years. The application you're going to be looking at is year 1. So the funding is for year 1. The work plan, data collection, evaluation plan, this is all really year 1. When we pick someone, they will, when we pick a winner and we notify them, they will reapply for year 2 of funding, but it's called a continuation application. It's not, we won't need readers again for year 2. We just evaluate it internally and decide if we want to continue with the program. Okay, so the total amount is $3.15 million that they can apply for the first year if they are applying for all 3 program areas. I don't think you guys will need to know this really for your review, but we did spell out in our RFA that the amount for the Capital Quality program area will go up each year because more and more providers will come into our QRIS system. And the grant amount for the Shared Service Business Alliance should go down in subsequent years because ultimately Shared Service Business Alliances are supposed to be self-sustaining. Providers are supposed to pay a fee into the network and kind of have it be its own standalone business. So we did spell that out in the RFA. So this is just numerically what I explained. The QRIS will go up, and we quantified using estimates related to how many new licensed centers we see each year. So we did an estimate to figure out how much we think approximately will need to go up each year. The CCR&R program area is consistent, and then the Shared Service Alliance, we want to see that go down because we want the applicants to explain to us how they're going to introduce a fee structure and make it self-sustaining. Okay, so basically the changes from the prior years, we've talked about the consolidation. Another major change is that the Shared Service Business Alliance formerly only included homes, and we decided to add small, what we call small child development centers into the network for this iteration. We define it as classroom level, 4 classrooms or less. This was another strategic change that we made because we were hearing that a Shared Service Business Alliance is more likely to be self-sustaining if you have new people coming into the fray, like I mentioned with child care resource and referral. But in DC, for some reason, we don't have a lot of new home providers coming into the mix. We have a lot of new small center. So the small center A will help us with the kind of sustainability long-term of the alliance because they're just more willing to pay for those services as compared with very seasoned, experienced home providers who say, you know, I already know kind of this stuff, so why would I pay for this help? And then also because they face a lot of the same challenges, and they could benefit from things that are offered in the Shared Service Business Alliance, like a membership, someone helping you analyzing your financial statements, a membership to QuickBooks, HR, temps, those kinds of things. So the grantee responsibilities is laid out in the RFA. I'm going to go back to the RFA just to show you that it's very long. And I'm going to explain why it's so long. Okay. So it starts on page 20, and we have a section that talks about what everybody has to do. So really look for these things. And then we break it down into program area 1, 2, and 3. Now the reason that this is so long is that what we wanted to do for documentation, also for fairness and equity, was to lay everything out on the table in case we had some new people come in and say, well, I might apply, but you know, the incumbents, what we call the incumbents, basically have such an advantage because they've already been doing the work. So we really wanted to lay everything out on the table in a way to just say, here is the world of what we know is happening in these programs, and you can innovate from here, but this is the baseline expectation. Something else we did in this section is we broke it down by stakeholder groups. So you'll see this is how you're supporting the early childhood workforce. This is how you're supporting families and communities. And this is how you're supporting owners, the leaders, what we call, at the facilities. So we'll look at this in the PowerPoint, but the PowerPoint skims it a little bit, so I'd recommend looking at the RFA on pages 20 to 29 to just get a sense, both for the application read that's coming up, and then also just for your own information about kind of what's been happening in these 3 programs in DC, because those 9 pages just give a great overview of the world of everything that's been happening in these programs, which have been really successful so far. Okay, so these are the standard requirements for all the program areas in that first section. So we're looking for them to have working knowledge of the core knowledge areas, Common Core. We want at least 2 staff that are trained and reliable in, these are our metrics for evaluating quality, class, ITers, and FICers. We want a system for logging TA and professional offerings. and we want a lot of coordination, which is mentioned in a couple other places. Okay, so as I mentioned, the grantee responsibilities is quite long, so really read through in the RFA to get that sense. Next, we're going to talk about the grant objectives. The grant objectives are the guiding light for the work plan and the data collection and evaluation plan, both of which you'll need to look at and score. And I will kind of walk you through the logistics of what that really looks like. So make sure that you feel comfortable with these objectives and you feel like you understand them. The assurances are not something to really worry about for your purposes. These are requirements that the applicants must agree to and comply with. Okay, so applications closed yesterday. We are working through the timeline now. So you'll notice that with the Quinn, we assigned the applications right away the next day. I'm thinking that because some of you are doing both, it's just easier for us to finish up Quinn before we assign these applications. I think I put the 29th in the original email to everybody, but I should be able to assign them sooner. I'm hoping to assign them on Wednesday, which is the 28th. So I'm hoping to get them to you on the 28th. And then just like with Quinn, you will have 2 weeks, so September 11th, we would like those back. So just a day earlier than the previous date we had talked about. So this is you guys. You're the review panel. You're going to help us evaluate and score and rate these applications. And remember again that your comments should really be constructive and specific, because we have to give them to the applicants when they request them, and then they can also be publicly available if there's a FOIA request. So being very specific and constructive, almost like you're giving a performance review of the application, is really what we're looking for. So these are our expectations. We're looking for you to draw upon your expertise. Let us know if there's a conflict. Maintain the confidentiality. So we have to tell you things like who the applicants are, how many applications we received. So please maintain confidentiality about that. Adhere to all the deadlines. You're going to look at the applications independently and score them, and you're using the information that's available in the application. So no need, and please don't, to kind of do any external research and Google the organizations and such. So we expect you to read the applications in their entirety, follow the instructions. Like I said, only the information in the application. You can provide, you will need to provide a numeric score for each criteria and give constructive written comments. So we're really looking for strengths and weaknesses that match up with your scores. So if you are writing a glowing comment but you only give 5 out of 10, just that would be a question mark that we would flag. And in terms of this last comment actually about treating applications in a fair and equitable manner, just making sure that you're focusing on content over things like grammar and spelling in case there are English language learners in our applicant pool. So we just want to be cognizant of that. Okay, so this is what I just mentioned about scores and comments aligning. You can do partial credit, so you can do 6 out of 10, but you can't do 6.5 out of 10. They have to be whole numbers. And remember that the comments that you give can really be used by, and are used by, organizations to make themselves stronger and better next time if they don't win. Or if they are going to win, they help OSSE figure out, okay, we are going to award this, but when we do our post-award negotiation, here's a question that the readers thought of that we agree with. This is a gap area or a question we need to figure out. These are some characteristics of high-quality comments. They're objective, neutral, unbiased, and consistent. So again, analytical instead of descriptive. So not just they answered areas 1, 2, and 3, but how did they answer them? And did you feel that it was feasible, that it made sense? Okay. Low quality comments, too little documentation, too curt, yes or good or bad, repeating the selection criteria instead of more analytical, thinking about grammar and spelling only. if it's not related to what we've decided is the selection criteria, inconsistent, judgments outside the scope, or would be inappropriate to share. Okay, so here we gave you concrete examples that I will send you all this this PowerPoint so you can review it. Example of acceptable comment was that in the executive summary, the applicant is providing an overview of the program. It includes this target areas, the model. There's a plan to ensure that the families receive services. And then you've defined the weaknesses. So alternatively, if this was a terrible executive summary, here's how you would describe it. Our example is admittedly a little descriptive. So you could definitely go deeper than this, get more analytical. For example, a weakness could be they outline a plan for how the services will be delivered, but it doesn't seem feasible, or the timeline doesn't work, or just kind of giving that critical feedback. Same thing here with the information about the organization. A weakness could be they didn't give an explanation of why they selected this model, the partnership. They didn't explain how the programs align and how the work will align. Okay, so I will let you guys read all of these on your own. Again, these are just examples to really get you thinking about the kinds of comments you could give. The detailed planned expenditures is really just the budget. So for the purposes of the budget, you're really looking to see that the budget tells the story of the proposal narrative. So you don't need to, if you have questions, please note them, like the rent seems high, like that kind of thing is fine. But we're more looking for, they have, outlined a really magnificent program. Can the budget cover the program as they've outlined it? Does the budget make sense? So this is a guide to help you kind of see here. So if something is 0 to 5, then you would just say, okay, if it's limited or weak, it's a 1. If it's fair or good, it's a, well, I guess if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if score not assignable, a 0, limited or weak could be a 1 or 2, fair could be 3, good 4, strong exceptional 5. And then if it's out of 10 or 15, you could kind of do that same thing and break up the scores in that way. Okay, so now actually into the scoring rubric. So again, it's here, but if it's more useful for you, let's just go back to the RFA one more time. I prefer to walk through it here because it's just nice to have it all kind of in one place rather than split up on the slides. So the scoring rubric, there is an executive summary. It's not scored, but this is what we are looking for in the executive summary, and you can offer comments on how they respond. So you're looking for the applicant organization, the methodology to implement the grant, and this is just a restatement of the purpose, the structure of the program, so they need to tell you what program areas they're covering, and then the plan to ensure services continue uninterrupted. The first section is 10 points, and it has 2 sections that are 5 points each. This is the same as Quinn. Mission and history, and then strategic logic. So mission and history, who is the organization, what's their core programs, why is it relevant to the purpose of the grant, what's the history of this organization. And then strategic logic is why do they want this grant right now, and if they're picking any partner organizations, who did they pick and why. Organizational knowledge is worth 35 points, and it has 4 sub-sections. So the first one is an overall kind of core competency section, and it breaks down everything that we expect to see as a core competency, no matter what they're applying to. So that's 15 points. The next one is looking for kind of a little bit of a gap identification. This is almost like a work performance task when you're applying for a job. So we are just asking to see how the applicants look at the system of early childhood. What is a gap in the entire system? What are we thinking about wrong? And it's really to test their analytical skills. It's not to say that we will be able to fix that problem through this grant alone, but it's a 5-point exercise. The next one is organizational networks. which is worth 10 points. And it's really any partners, public and private, that will complement the grant and expand its impact. And then the last section is ongoing collaboration with government stakeholders, which is basically organizational networks, but for government. So it names a number of agencies that the current partners have worked with. So we want to make sure that those relationships are maintained. So that is the first two sections. Now, where it gets a little bit interesting with the Building and Sustaining Grant is there are tiered point levels. So what that means is getting into the process to provide and monitor services, which is 45 points, and as you'll notice, it's the biggest section. This is where you start to get more points if you've applied for more than one program area. So in this section, there's a total of 20 points available. Everyone can get these first 5. Talk about how the services are uninterrupted, how your program is innovative, and building on the existing model. Now, if you apply for only Program Area 1, you can get 5 points for this, and then 5 points for answering this. So you could get 10 out of 20. If you apply for Program Area 1 and 2, you could get 5 plus 5 plus 5, so you could get 15 out of 20. And then if you apply for all 3 program areas, you are eligible for the full 20 out of 20. We did this because we really wanted to show a preference for a consortium application, but we also told our applicants, if you feel that you are strongest on your own and that's how you prefer to administer the grant, then it's better to have a very strong Program Area 1 application or single program area application than to have a weak consortium application that isn't thought through. So you'll see a combination of, you might get a consortium application or a single application, but just please note this kind of tiering approach. So in the scoring rubric, if they're not applying for Program Area 1, you just put zeros. Okay, similar thing for the communication strategy, which is a maximum of 5 points, which is broken into 2 points for the whole program area, and then 1 point each for what they specifically applied to. So again, if they haven't applied to CCR&R, you'll score the first section out of 2 points, the next section out of 1 point, and then CCR&R will automatically be 0 because they have not applied for it, and then shared services you'll score out of 1. So that applicant could get a maximum of 4 out of 5 points if they're applying for 2 of the 3 program areas. I hope this is making sense. Same thing for the process for continuous learning. So this one has a total of 15 points, and it's broken down into 9 for everybody and then 2 each for the program areas. So those are really the only sections that are tiered in that way. So the overall result is that the maximum scores are, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they're not that far apart that it's impossible to win the grant as a single applicant. So it's not impossible, but it's definitely, you're eligible to receive a higher ceiling of points if you apply for 2 or 3. The last section in here before the budget is really the work plan and data collection evaluation plan. Those are 3 and 2 points respectively, and I'll show you where those are in EGMS. And then we have the financial management and the budget. So financial management is a narrative section where they're going to explain the fiscal controls, the financial records, and compliance with GAAP. Generally accepted accounting principles, and if they have the structure of the grant, how are they paying those partners? They're contractors probably, so how are they paying them? And kind of tell us that. The last section here is the proposed budget. So like I said, is it telling the story of using the grant funds to address the requirements? We gave them some helpful information here about what goes in each category, so feel free to read this. Okay, so let's come back to our PowerPoint, and I'll walk through a little bit more of the content. So we talked about information about organization. We talked about organizational knowledge. So process to provide and monitor, I mostly just described the structure of that, so I'll go into the content in a little bit more depth now. So for process to provide and monitor, so everybody is eligible for these first 5 points. So how are those services uninterrupted, innovative, the existing model? And then QRIS, now I'm just referring back to the RFA, so we'll go back here. I just want to make sure everybody really understands the content of how they're evaluating. So what we want to see for program area 1 is these things for the 5 points: recruit, train, and retain the facilitators, who are basically the coaches. How are you going to adhere to the minimum requirements for the quality facilitators that we've outlined? How are you going to facilitate the development of a whole lot of acronyms, which I'll just define for you now. COPs are communities of practice. CQIP is continuous quality improvement plan. TA is technical assistance, and PD is professional development. And OSA is on-site administrator, which is the person that's the main contact for the facilitators as they're doing kind of this coaching. The next section, the CCR&R. So we want to hear the organization's plan to provide CCR&R services that are generally offered by other states' resource and referral systems, but are tailored to the district's needs. And then how are they going to provide consumer education and outreach? The third prompt is very general for shared services, just how are you going to implement the alliance? Getting into the communication strategy, which is another one of these tiered sections that we talked about. For everybody, we want to see the approach to conducting outreach and delivering services to culturally and linguistically diverse populations, particularly Amharic and Spanish speaking. So that's a big emphasis in this RFA. So you'll see a lot of mention of Amharic and Spanish speaking populations. We want to see how the communication strategy is rooted in the CCDF plan, and how will the applicant work with OSSI to really tell the story about the successes of the grant. Going into here, this is one of my favorite prompts for QRIS. So describe your elevator speech, because that's actually a situation that happens at OSSI very regularly, is that the quality facilitator grantee could be in an elevator with someone who has resisted joining Capital Quality. So they have that short ride to tell them what it is, how it works, and the benefits. Program area 2, what's the plan to collect and disseminate information through different mediums of communication, because different mediums is key to reaching the most number of people. Shared Service Business Alliance, how will the organization retain the current members and recruit and attract additional members, particularly in light of having the small centers now in the fray. Okay, going into the process for continuous learning. From everybody, we want to know how they're going to get authentic feedback on an ongoing basis and put that back into the program and change the model. So how is the model collecting feedback, and how is it agile and flexible to allow for changes? And then how will the feedback be shared with OSSI? Getting into the specifics for each program area. For program area 1, demonstrating the plan for the quality facilitators and the approach to the management of the continuous quality improvement plan for the providers. Program area 2, how are they going to use an annual needs assessment for providers and other tools to solicit any feedback. How are they going to use directors' corners, which are a current practice that we have that's really well liked. Program area 3, market demand. So this is really interesting. How are they going to assess the home provider's needs? Likelihood they'll join the alliance. What are they going to do to develop relationships? Give us the list of back office functions that they are going to be providing. I'll toggle up to that in a second. And then give us the breakdown of how you're going to introduce that fee structure that it doesn't exist right now. How are they going to expand services to small centers and demonstrate the cost benefit of analysis? Just to go up. So there's a number of references in here to the general grantee responsibility section. So I'm just going to go back up and show you the list of back office functions that we expect. Okay, so that's included on pages 27 and 28. So if you have an application that's talking about program area 3, you're going to look to make sure that they're addressing these grantee responsibilities in particular. So we talk about having 2 tiers. Tier 1 is the basic number, and then Tier 2 has additional. So these are the kinds of services that are included in the current Shared Service Business Alliance. And since there was just a reference to that in the scoring rubric, I want to point that out. Okay. All right, let's keep going. So we've talked about this. We've talked about this. Okay. These are attachments that they're going to put in other attachments. Now, some of my applicants called me and said that they didn't have enough room in their application to talk about everything they wanted to talk about, especially if they were applying for more than one program area. So there will be some attachments that I will try to highlight for you because they might be continuations of answers that you really need to see. In terms of these attachments that are here, besides the partnership agreements, these are more for OSSE's purposes than for your purposes as readers. But I just want to highlight that there might be a to be continued or an answer might be cut off. So it's going to be in a zipped file of the attachments that I will send you next week. Okay, at this point, I am going to go ahead and turn off our recording and then get a little deeper into EGMS. Okay, are there any questions so far? Okay, let me just get into EGMS a little bit. I did do a deeper recording of the, hold on a second. Okay, I'm going to just walk through what the application looks like in EGMS. So all of you should have been emailed credentials. When you log in, you're just going to see search and reader review. You're going to click reader review. And from the drop-down menu, you'll click building and sustaining queue ECE. So a couple people have said that they don't have anything in their queue yet, and that's because I haven't assigned the applications yet because I just want to wrap up. I want to wrap up everything with Quinn before we do this. So you won't see anything there yet. It looks like everyone will have one, maybe two applications to review, and thank you everyone for responding with your preferences on that. So for the purposes of just walking through, these are test applications, they're not real, so I'm just going to show you what the application and checklist looks like itself. If you recall from the last training, we walked through the original process. So when it first comes to you, it'll say reader notified over here, and then you indicate if you have a conflict of interest, and then you hit save conflict answers, and then the review status will click, will say no conflict. If you have any questions on that, I do have the Quinn training recorded, and we did do that process in the Quinn training, but since a couple people have to hop off at 2, so I wanted to go a little quicker this time. But if you have any questions or problems about that, just let me know and I can refer you to the right spot in the Quinn training or give you a live demo. So I'm going to go ahead and hit select and review application. So make sure your pop-up blocker is off in this case. Let me move this out of the way. Okay. So you're going to have two windows come up. One is the grant application and one is your score sheet. So you'll notice that the grant application, if we go over to program information, this is really what you are evaluating for these sections. And then you go to detailed planned expenditures for the detailed planned expenditures. Okay, so program information, walking through here, we will see the executive summary. Okay, and you'll just see my nonsense answers for the purposes of testing the grant. You'll notice that the prompt that you have as the reader is exactly the same as the prompt that the applicant has. So it's a reminder here of what's supposed to be included in there. So you'll give your comments, but again, no score on executive summary. Moving on to information about the organization. So here is the mission and history and the strategic logic. So yours will look the same except that you enter scores. So you will let us know the comments, which will be specific and very helpful and constructive. And then you're giving a total, and please make sure you just note the maximum point value. So, okay, I really liked this, 5 out of 5, 5 out of 5. You have to come down and click Save Page at the bottom always. So let's keep going. Organizational knowledge. Oh. Well, let me know if that happens. That's supposed to be fixed, so let me know if that happens. But organizational knowledge will match, and you'll see. Okay, one thing to note in here is that this text is a typo. We did email the applicants, and they were all okay. We did email them to let them know, but the testing of the grants is a little bit of a quicksand situation. You kind of fix one thing, and then 3 other things break. So this prompt here is not correct. The prompt under this should be, let me see, under organizational knowledge. When in doubt, just look at your RFA. So it should be, describe your organization's experience in each of the program areas. Knowledge should be demonstrated in the following core competencies. And somehow things just got triangulated, and it's talking about collaborative relationships with other agencies, and it's another section. So just ignore this paragraph. You're evaluating these core competencies, and your score sheet should reflect that. But just in case you're confused about why the application and the score sheet say something different, that's just an error, a typo error that we did notify the applicants about. You'll keep going, and you'll have gap identification, organizational networks, and the collaboration with government stakeholders. So you'll review their answers and you'll score, and hopefully you won't get that error, but please let me know if you do. Process to provide and monitor services is the one I really want to show you guys. So this is the one that has some of that tiering that we talked about. So you're scoring for 20 total points. You're scoring 5 for all, a maximum of 5 for all program areas, 5 for QRIS, 5 for quality facilitators. And then when you hit save, this subtotal, you don't enter this. This won't be enterable. It will automatically generate for you. So you're entering these sub-scores. Now, I had a lot of issues in the grant design with the placement of the bullets here. So if anything is unclear about what you're scoring and what box and what text box, please let me know. But again, if this is confusing, for example, program area 2, the CCR&R services is down here instead of above the text box. Again, I would just refer to your RFA because it's just so linear and clean in a Word document and very messy on a website. So I would recommend kind of going, having your RFA maybe in hard copy handy nearby. Same thing here, that the text for some reason ended up below the text box, so it's just a little bit funky on this particular page. So if any of this is confusing, just let me know. So you're scoring the sub areas, maximum of 9 points here, and then if they're not applying for QRIS, I would put 0, and I would put NA in the comment box, and so forth, depending on what they're applying for. Now here, there are the development of the work plan and data collection evaluation plan. This is one of the ones that sometimes confuses readers because there is no text box in the application, and that's because we say using the charts available in EGMS, because what you're evaluating is this chart here, the work plan. So what they do is they take each objective and they say, okay, for improve the quality of early learning environments, my first activity is this, here's how I'm describing it, here's who's responsible, and the time range. And they do that for each of the 6 objectives. And similarly for the evaluation and data collection plan, they're doing that same thing. They're giving it a sub-objective, the program-specific measurable objective, the methodology for data collection, and then the outcome. And they're doing that for each of the 6 objectives that we talked about. So I hope this makes sense with kind of the tiered approach. And again, if anything's unclear there, I apologize, but just let me know. The detailed planned expenditure has the one narrative section and then the budget you're looking for. So the financial management section is right here. So it's at the very beginning of detailed planned expenditures. And then what you're looking at is these are the categories broken down. I would recommend starting with the budget summary. So they're applying in this test case $19,000, and here's how it breaks out. And then I can look at salaries and benefits. I can look at professional services. And again, I'm looking really with an eye to see, is this sufficient? Is this funding sufficient to cover the work that they've outlined? Is it realistic? Once you've gone through and entered the scores and comments for everything and saved page at the bottom of everything, you're coming over here, and at the bottom there will be calculate totals and save page. You're going to hit calculate totals to get this bottom number to appear, and you have to hit save page because if you don't hit save page, for some reason it won't carry the score over into your to-do list. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So it says 100 here, 100 out of 100, which is very unlikely that any of you will give a 100 out of 100. To get back to that screen that I had, I clicked close the score sheet, and now I'm clicking click to return to reader to-do list. Now when I do that, see the 100 is here. If I didn't click save page at the bottom of that scoring summary when I was working through it, this 100 would be blank. And for some reason, EGMS will let you click this and click submit even with a blank score. Now when that happens, it's kind of a nightmare because then I have to reopen the scores for all 3 of the readers for that application to have you save the page and try again. So just make sure that this score is here and that it reflects your overall views on the application. If it's something like 45 out of 100 and you think, oh, I really liked it, maybe go back because you probably missed something. And then you want to make sure that, like I said, the score is physically appearing before you hit submit to OSCE. Those are the main components that I really wanted to walk through. Let me just see. There's also screenshots here. So let's look at the screenshots together quickly. So again, you're going to click that reader review. So here, this is helpful. So under the review status, the first status is reader notified. Then you click conflict of interest, no, because I'll be asking you first before I assign the application to you. If you do have a conflict or you're not sure, please just ask. Then when you hit no and save conflict answers, the review status changes to no conflict. And this is the definition of a conflict: personal or vested interest in the organizations that have submitted applications. And this is just screenshots of each of the application pages, like we talked about, okay? And these give not nonsense answers, more helpful answers than what I put in the test environment. Again, so here you can kind of see the sub scores. So you're giving 5 out of 5 here, 3 out of 5, and then you'll keep going, and the 15 will sum up for you. So here you can see, like I mentioned, the total points is blank. You have to hit calculate totals for it to generate, and then the save page. This is just to show you that you really need to turn your pop-up blocker off, because one page is the checklist, the top page, and the top screenshot, and the bottom one is the application itself. Okay, so here the difference is that the score came over, it clicked review started. You want to hit the select radio button and submit, and once you do that, it will change to completed. So that review status is really a good place for you to look to kind of see, like, where did I leave this and what's happening. I'm not going to go through the common errors and quick tips since we did that on our last call. I will go ahead and turn the recording off and see if there's any more specific questions.